The One Who Stayed. On the night of April 6, 1994, an airplane carrying the Rwandan president, Juvenal Habyarimana, was shot down by Hutu extremists while preparing to land in Kigali, the capital city of Rwanda. The president was returning from talks with Tutsi rebels about creating peace between the two ethnic groups. Hutu extremists did not believe in sharing their power with the Tutsis and were angry that their president had been talking to them. When the news spread that the president's plane had been shot down by the Rwandan Patriotic Front, a Tutsi-based group was wrongfully accused of assassinating the president. This single event sparked the Rwandan genocide. In 1994, the ethnic majority tribe in Rwanda, the Hutus, started a massive, tragic genocide in the capital city of Rwanda. The mass killing mainly targeted another ethnic tribe in Rwanda, the Tutsis. Tragically, Hutu citizens were urged by local officials to kill their Tutsi neighbors or anyone who was opposed to the extermination of Tutsis. This included the very people they had often lived their daily lives with. The killing started to spread like wildfire, and from April 7, 1994 to July of 1994, over 800,000 Tutsis were murdered in cold blood. One of the many people witnessing this tragedy unfold was American Carl Wilkens. Wilkens had become the country director of the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, the ADRA, a humanitarian arm of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He then moved to Rwanda with his wife Teresa and his 3 children in March of 1990, but they never expected that their volunteerism would take them right into the middle of a genocide. Violence in Rwanda escalated rapidly. Gunfire around the Wilkens home became normal and expected. Tension had been growing, and Wilkens wasn't sure what the outcome would be. The option of evacuation soon arrived, and Carl, along with his wife, had to make a choice. Would he stay in Rwanda or evacuate with the other foreigners? With the United States Embassy closed and other routes to safety cut off, 2 Tutsi workers were forced to remain at the Wilkens home. One was a young woman that worked for Wilkens, Anitha, and the other one was a young watchman named John Vieira. Wilkens realized if he left, these 2 innocent people would both meet horrible fates, and he knew he had to stay behind. Wilkens then made the courageous decision to stay behind in Rwanda.
He had the opportunity to leave with us then, but we wouldn't be able to provide any support afterward. And I remember Carl saying, Laura, I can't leave. I need to be here to protect my people here. And I remember thinking how courageous he was and how awful I felt thinking that the U.S. government wasn't going to do everything they could to save him, even if he made the decision to stay.
On April 10, 1994, Wilkens' wife Teresa and their 3 children evacuated with an American convoy to Burundi, the country just south of Rwanda, leaving Carl Wilkens to be the last remaining American in Rwanda. With Wilkens' courageous decision to stay, there were several worrisome warnings. One of these messages came from Robert S. Falkenberg, the president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. In a letter to Wilkens, Falkenberg stressed the dangers that lay ahead if he stayed. He made it clear that he thought it best for Wilkens to evacuate with all the other foreigners, but Wilkens refused Falkenberg's directive and told him in a letter that he would see out the safety of the Tutsis living with him. Wilkens hadn't left his home for 3 weeks because of the danger in the city of Kigali, which had prompted a government-initiated 24-hour curfew. When the government was finally willing to let people come out of their houses, Wilkens prepared to venture out into the dangers of Rwanda. On April 25th, Carl Wilkens stepped outside to what seemed like a completely different world. Roadblocks were set up every few hundred yards. Hutu soldiers guarded the roadblocks armed with rifles and shotguns. Tutsis could not make it past the roadblocks because if they attempted to, they would be identified as a Tutsi and killed. Carl knew he had to acquire a travel permit to get past these roadblocks easier. He went to a local government building to get a permit. There he met Colonel Renzaho. With the president and prime minister both assassinated, Rwanda had become the acting governor of the city of Kigali. Rwanda agreed to give Wilkens his travel permit. This was Wilkens' ticket to travel freely through the city, allowing him the opportunity to help as many people as possible. When Wilkens asked if Rwanda had heard of any people in need of help, Rwanda informed Wilkens of the tragic situation at the Gasimba orphanage. Carl visited the Gasimba orphanage where he met Demas Gasimba, director of the orphanage. Demas was struggling to keep the children and Tutsis that sought refuge in his orphanage alive. Clean water was lacking and children were dying from dehydration and malnutrition, with more children and vulnerable Tutsi citizens coming in search of shelter every day. Carl soon began working very closely with the orphanage, delivering food, water, medicine, and other supplies for the people in need. He gathered most of his supplies from the Red Cross and the UN. Sometimes Wilkens even bargained with people that had looted abandoned homes. With the 400 people hiding in the ceilings and walls of the orphanage, it was difficult to get the necessary amount of water, even with Wilkens' effort to obtain it. One of the days, Wilkens was filling up his water jugs at a well-known faucet in Kigali. He heard about a rarely used faucet with clean water. This faucet was known as the sniper faucet because of the common sniper fire around the area. He quickly left the crowded faucet and drove towards the sniper faucet, hoping to find a less busy faucet where he could quickly fill up his cans with water. When he arrived, several children gathered around him and volunteered to help Wilkens. While filling the jugs, a sudden flare of sniper fire broke out and everyone dove for cover. The kids and Carl felt threatened, but still wanting to continue, went back to the faucet. After much hard work, Wilkens and the children were able to fill all the barrels with water. He began driving back to the orphanage when snipers began to shoot out his tires, but he still managed to deliver the desperately needed water to the children in the orphanage. One of the many days that Wilkens was delivering water to the Gasimba orphanage, shortly after he arrived, 50 armed militiamen who were members of the Interahamwe, a Hutu extremist organization, surrounded the orphanage. The news had finally spread that the orphanage was hiding Tutsis. After taking in this scene, Wilkens called the Red Cross for help, and soon 7 men from the Rwandan police force arrived. Realizing they would need more help, the police instructed Carl to go to their headquarters to retrieve help. Wilkens was relieved to have a potential ally. He was also worried because the police force could be helpful, but they also helped to orchestrate the genocide. Carl had to make the decision to trust the policeman and possibly risk the safety of the orphans and others hiding. Jean-Francois, Demas's brother, pleaded with Carl to stay, but Wilkens knew he needed to bravely venture to the Rwandan police force headquarters to get help. When Wilkens arrived, a secretary told him that the acting prime minister, Jean Kambanda, elected by the Hutu extremists, was currently in the building. When Kambanda stepped into the hallway, Wilkens took a chance, walked up to him, and explained that he was the director of the ADRA. Wilkens told him about the situation at Gasimba and described how worried he was about there being a massacre. Kambanda listened to him, and then a miracle happened. The acting prime minister arranged for multiple buses and trucks to transport the orphans to a church near a UN mission. Kambanda said he would see to the safety of the orphans. The Interahamwe was preparing to begin the massacre at the orphanage when government soldiers sent by the prime minister interfered and said they had orders to take the orphans to a safer location. All 400 people evacuated the orphanage. They boarded the buses and trucks quickly for fear of their lives. It was obvious they had been hiding for weeks and could easily be identified as Tutsis. With the help of Carl Wilkens, all 400 people survived and remained in the church until the genocide ended in July of 1994. Once assured that everyone would be safe, Carl Wilkens got on a plane to Nairobi and was reunited with his family. Wilkens and his wife have continued to do humanitarian work in Rwanda to help repair the emotional and physical tragedy of the genocide. In addition, Wilkens felt a calling to educate the world about what happened in Rwanda. For over a decade, Carl has been speaking in schools on nearly every continent about his experience in Rwanda and sharing the power of stories and service to build bridges to peace across cultures. When asked why he stayed, Carl Wilkens replied,
"While all of those things played in, the bottom line is it just seemed the right thing to do."
By the time the genocide ended, 70% of the Tutsi population was killed. Tragically, that equated to over 800,000 murders of men, women, and children. If it were not for Carl Wilkens, that number would have been greater. Wilkens, the only American that stayed in Rwanda during the genocide, heroically saved the lives of hundreds of Tutsis and Tutsi sympathizers, not because he had to, but because it was simply the right thing to do.
We don't have to be defined by our worst losses. We can be defined by what we do with what remains, what we do next.